Our World Over Presidential Contenders series continues. My next guest served as governor of New York for 3 terms. Now, he's known for being fiscally conservative and outspoken on issues of foreign policy, immigration reform, and the environment, and he has never lost an election. But is there a path for him in this crowded GOP field? Joining me to discuss is GOP presidential candidate, Governor George Pataki. Governor, thanks for being here.
Raymond, great being on with you.
Now, I want to start with these debates. We are anticipating the first round of debates, 16 candidates in the mix. The criteria was that you polled in the top 10. You are not there. You're polling near the bottom of the pack. What's the path for you, and what do you make of this criteria for these debates?
Well, first of all, with the criteria, I think it's unfortunate. If you look at the last poll, there are 9 of the 16 candidates who are between 4 and 0. I'm at 1. But that means the overwhelming majority are within the margin of error, and yet some will be in and some will be out. I'd love to be in the debate, but I've never cried over the rules. If that's what the rules are, you just go out there and make the case, fight the fight, and look for the next opportunity. You know, I'm a Republican in New York. There were 3 million more Democrats. That wasn't exactly fair. But you can't, if you can't change the circumstances, you just overcome them.
What's the path? How do you see yourself fitting in? Trump is leading the pack right now.
The path is to have a vision that people can relate to. There are 2 things here. First, I will win the election if I'm the nominee. In 92 years, there have been 2 Republicans elected governor of New York State, and I was elected 3 times. I know I can appeal beyond the Republican base to independents, conservative Democrats, moderates, to immigrants, to Latinos, and to others, and win the election. And second, we need to transform Washington. Not just manage it, but transform it. And I was able to do that in a deep blue state in New York, change the direction of the government greatly. I can do that in Washington if I have the opportunity.
Tell me for a moment, do you support the Pope had this encyclical recently on the environment where he says, look, we've got to do something about climate change. Some of your competitors say, look, the Pope shouldn't be weighing in on this. Even Cardinal Pell in the Vatican this week said the Church doesn't have a special charism to pronounce on scientific issues. Your thoughts on this papal intervention?
We have been given by God this unique earth, this tremendous planet. And we have an obligation, whether it's the Pope or others, to leave it better for the next generation than we inherited it. And I think that, yes, we do have to take steps, intelligent steps, consistent with economic growth, consistent with creating jobs, to leave this planet a better place. And that includes limiting the emissions of CO2 into the atmosphere that we do every day here and across the globe.
And you would support a UN mandate with taxes and things to achieve that end?
No, I'm a great believer in American sovereignty. And I fear that one of the reasons this has become such a polarizing debate is efforts have been made in Washington. Markey Waxman, one bill that was not really a climate change bill. It would have raised money for the federal government. It would have taken care of cronies who got exemptions and credits. And it would have controlled many areas of the economy from Washington. I don't want that. I want us to use technology, innovation, incentivize the private sector to have economic reasons to reduce their CO2 emissions in a way that helps us grow the economy, doesn't increase costs to the consumer. And I know that can be done. This is America.
I want to shift to something, a little area where you disagree with the Pope, or so it seems. You're a Roman Catholic.
Yes, I am.
And you are one of the only candidates in this GOP field who is pro-choice. How do you reconcile your support for abortion rights with being a Catholic?
You know, I'm old enough to remember when John F. Kennedy was running for president. And the knock then, there had never been a Catholic president, is that the faith was going to determine policy. And I remember listening to that debate and saying, my faith will inform my behavior and my actions, and it will help create the values that I live under in public office. But ultimately, I'm going to have to govern in a way that I believe is consistent with the public interest. And I don't think we're going to overturn Roe v. Wade, but I think there are many things that we can do, like permanently ban funding for abortions, ban funding for Planned Parenthood, what we just saw about them.
You think they should be nationally defunded?
I think they should be defunded.
After that video?
I think it's just outrageous. I think there comes a point where, not as a matter of religious belief, but as a matter of science, when a life clearly exists. And right now that's 20 weeks. And I think it's appropriate to pass legislation protecting that life. So we're not going to overturn Roe v. Wade. I do not support trying to overturn Roe v. Wade, but intelligent steps to raise consciousness.
You don't support any efforts to overturn Roe v. Wade?
You know, it's been talked about now for 30 years. Let's focus on what we can accomplish, and I believe that these are, what I just outlined, are things that can be accomplished by the next president.
Let's talk for a moment about the gay marriage ruling that came from the Supreme Court. Your thoughts on the way that ruling was handed down?
I think
its reasoning.
I think it was a terrible decision. I think it's totally wrong that 5 individuals, not accountable to the public, can unilaterally decide what they think constitutes marriage. It is not respect for the rule of law. The rule of law in this country has always been marriages between a man and woman. And we had the political process underway. My state changed the law through its political process and authorized gay marriage. I wouldn't have supported that law, but I respected the political process's right to do that. But the fact that these 5 individuals just decided on their own to reconstitute marriage, I think, was completely wrong, an abuse of judicial power. And by the way, whether it's Roe v. Wade, whether it's this decision, I would appoint judges who believe in the Constitution and believe that it is the elected representatives in the political process that should decide these issues, and not unelected judges.
Justices like whom? Who would be your model, considering who's on the court now?
Like Scalia, like Clarence Thomas, like Alito. I think these are judges who, when you read their opinions, look at the Constitution, look at President, look at the law and the role of the court. I mean, I remember reading many times the Federalist, where Hamilton is talking about how the judiciary is the least dangerous branch. Right now, it seems sometimes that it's the most aggressive branch in doing things that should be left to the elected representatives of the people.
There is seemingly a coming conflict, in fact, it's probably already here, between this newly established rights for gays, particularly gay marriage, and religious freedom and the exercise of religion. Would you support any legislation to protect the religious conscience of people directly involved in a marriage business, a photographer, a baker, a fellow who owns a hall?
I think it depends on the language of the legislation, but the answer is yes.
Well, you opposed that Indiana
I opposed, and ultimately they amended the Indiana law because there was not. It wasn't just me. The governor and the legislature ultimately decided that they should amend the law. Right. And I haven't read the amended law, but we have to protect freedom of religion and freedom to exercise religious consciousness. We don't want to have discrimination in this country, but it's a question of the language of legislation.
Let's shift gears, talk about immigration for a moment, something you've been very outspoken on.
Yes.
You have a plan to deal with the 11 million people who are here. Tell us about that plan, and how is that not amnesty?
It's not amnesty because, first of all, we have to respect the rule of law. And I would have no program until we secure our border and until we make sure that those who have been involved in criminal acts are deported or else put in jail in the United States. But it's completely unrealistic for us to think we're going to take 11 or 12 million people, put them on buses, and send them back. But on the other hand, it's important we uphold the rule of law. Our freedom, our rights are dependent on respect for the rule of law. And when the first act of millions of people is to break the rule of law, there has to be a consequence.
And your consequence would be service hours.
Right. What we do in communities across America when someone has broken the law, and we're not going to put them in jail, and we're not going to fine them thousands of dollars. I would have them come forward, acknowledge they broke the law, commit that they would not do it again, and then require 200 hours of community service. What we do for violations across America, working in a hospital, working in a school, working in a park, they will have paid a penalty for having broken that law. Understand the rule of law matters, and we will have upheld the rule of law in a practical way without sending 11 million people out of the country.
Talk to me for a moment about sanctuary cities. What would you as president do? There are moves afoot here on Capitol Hill to defund, penalize the sanctuary cities as they exist today, given the explosion we're seeing in crimes from illegal aliens.
I support that. I support defunding sanctuary cities. I think you cannot have a nation, a country, when certain communities can just say, we're going to ignore this part of the federal law, or this law doesn't apply to our city or our town or our state. The federal laws apply across the country.
To everyone.
To everyone. And they have to, or else again, it's the same thing, disrespect for the rule of law. I would defund sanctuary cities.
Let's talk about this Iran deal. John Kerry was on Capitol Hill this week making the pitch. He said, look, here's the option. Either no deal in place or a deal where we can monitor them, we can slow down their ability to get a nuke. Do you buy that?
Raymond, not at all. This administration has misrepresented what was happening to the American people the whole way through, and that's being kind. Barack Obama and John Kerry both say that a bad deal, both said throughout this, a bad deal is worse than no deal. Now they're saying an awful deal is better than no deal because there's no alternative. They have completely changed their position, as they did on things like saying we're not going to let them have a missile program. Now they will. We're not going to lift the arms embargo. Now we will. We're going to have anytime, anywhere inspections. Now we have inspections that are extremely doubtful that they will have any impact at all. This is an awful, awful agreement and should be rejected.
What would you do with ISIS as they continue to move across the Middle East, taking huge areas of land?
I'd acknowledge that they are radical Islamists. They are not just an arbitrary terrorist organization. They are jihadists acting in the name of Islam. Fueled by a religious ideology. Fueled by a religious ideology. Can you imagine? If those were radical Christians performing those acts, how quick this administration would say these Christian extremists have to be stopped, but they won't even use the word Islamic. It is not just political correctness, it is absurdity. And we have got to do whatever it takes to stop them, empower the Peshmerga, the Kurdish fighters, empower the Sunni sheiks who are on our side against ISIS directly, and if need be, use American troops to destroy their training centers and recruitment centers.
What would you do about the Christian minorities there? Should we welcome some of those Christians into the United States or try to settle them elsewhere in Europe?
I think the most important thing is to allow them to stay in their homes by destroying and defeating ISIS. And Raymond, by the way, I just reread the September 11th Commission report. I was governor on September 11th. I saw the horror of radical Islam being not taken seriously enough because we thought it was a continent away. I know that ISIS poses as grave a threat today, not just to those Christian communities in their neighboring areas, but to us here in America. So we have to stand, protect those Christian communities, but more importantly, protect ourselves by destroying ISIS where it exists. And that report said, if, for example, Iraq becomes a failed state and radical Islam takes hold there, we have to use all the might and power of the United States to make sure we destroy them there. That lesson has been forgotten by many, not by me. We have got to do that.
Two quick political questions before I let you go. One, evangelicals and Catholics are such a critical part of this vote, the base of the Republican Party. Given your position, your pro-life, pro-choice rather, position, are you afraid that you might alienate them and that it would be very difficult for you to bring them along? No,
I don't. I just spoke at the Faith and Freedom conference a few weeks ago. I spoke at the Christians United in Support of Israel, Pastor Hagee's group. And Christians, yes, they care about social issues, as do I, but they have a very broad agenda about freedom in America, about dealing with dignity with people, respecting religious freedom in individuals, dealing with issues like protecting this God-given earth that we love so much, making sure Americans are safe, growing our economy and creating jobs and opportunity for everyone. So there's a broad range of issues on which I agree with that coalition, on which that coalition agrees with me. So I'm very hopeful that people aren't going to say that anything other than this person can unite us, lead us, and govern successfully.
Final question. Donald Trump has moved to the top tier of the candidates in this race for the GOP nomination. Is there a message, is there a lesson in that candidacy that you're seeing? People say, oh, he's crazy, it's a sideshow. He's gaining traction and continues to move forward. What did George Pataki, or does George Pataki, take from Donald Trump's run?
You know, I think ultimately people are going to look for people who can bring us together and govern seriously, and look for someone who, for lack of a better word, actually acts presidential. And you can get headlines. I mean, I could get a headline by doing something outrageous or insulting or calling someone, and all of a sudden you get the press attention. But that's not who I am, and ultimately I don't think that's what the Americans want for their next leader. So I know it's an uphill slog. The first time I ran for governor, no one thought I had a chance. You believe in yourself, you believe in the people and the country and your vision of this country. Fight the fight and win.
Very good. Governor George Pataki, thank you for being here. Best of luck out on the trail. We'll be watching you.
Thank you very much, Ray.
Thank you.